Okay, so the third quality which John Donne noticed, or he called the feature of judgmental awareness, is cognitive effort. Thought, and I find this to be really useful, and this is one that you can pay attention to, and you can invite your meditation students to pay attention to this on the meditation cushion. So the thoughts, judgmental thoughts, they involve cognitive effort. There's a certain efforting required. And through mindfulness, we can distinguish between perception as a receptive process and thought or judgment as an active, constructive process. So in your mindfulness practice, you can notice, you can pay attention, and you can notice when you're deeply involved, fixated in these ruminative, proliferative thought processes. And there's a certain effort in that is required. It's an active process. And what we can do is, in noticing that, we can take a step back into this more receptive process. One way we could do that is by bringing awareness to the breath or to the body and to the present moment sensory experience. And we can begin to pay attention to our thought processes in a more receptive way, in much the same way we would pay attention to sounds or smells, that we don't have to be involved. And that comes back to these earlier subjects: thoughts are not real, and the sense that we can take this step back. Okay, we can notice the different voices inside of our head, that they're not all, that often the different voices are in conflict. One moment you think you look young, the next moment you look old. That one moment you're having a very sort of, the mind is just chatter, you're thinking about getting a haircut. The next moment you're thinking about some deeper existential thought process. So we can see that the mind is more like this society of voices, and we can pay attention to that in a much more receptive way, just noticing the coming and going of thoughts. Most people are familiar with this idea of the observer or the witness, and that's the quality that we are cultivating in our mindfulness practice, so that we're paying attention to thought in a much more receptive way and a much less involved way. And this does not mean that thoughts or judgments arise only when one makes a conscious effort, but rather that the process of forming thoughts requires additional mental conditions beyond those which are necessary for sheer perception. The formation of thoughts or judgment could thus be well below one's usual level of awareness, but it is nevertheless driven by factors such as interest, goal orientation, desires and dislikes, and so on, as these constitute a kind of cognitive effort. And this seems to be one factor in the emphasis on effortlessness as a means to release the structures that allow thoughts to arise. This may explain why one of the major themes of mindfulness practice is letting go. So I think there's a real value when a person is practicing mindfulness meditation to notice that quality of effort. Sometimes you feel it in your body, you feel your whole body getting involved, because there's this, the mind does not exist in a vacuum. There is a connection between the mind and the body. And the more we get involved, especially if it's a difficult thought process, the more the body will respond. And you really feel there's a visceral effort. And we can pay attention to that. Or it could be much more subtle, just noticing the effort that is maintaining very subtle, even slightly difficult or very old and familiar, painful thought processes, that also requires an effort. And if we notice that there's an effort in there, there can be an invitation to let go. And again, I would recommend coming to the breath, noticing the breath. That's a good way to release, to let go of that effort by bringing our attention into the present moment, into sensory experience, and just having that shift. So there's a greater sense of allowing, there's a greater sense of letting go. But the first thing is to recognize that cognitive effort. It's there. It might be very subtle, but it's there. There's a holding, there's a pattern. It's like having a difficult posture in the body. Holding your body in a weird way. And the invitation is just to let go. I remember, I think it's, I'm not sure which book it is, I'll talk about this later, but they said it's like holding on to a snake. It requires effort, but you try to hold on very tight. And the invitation is to let go, to allow the snake to go, to allow that cognitive effort to pass. So that book is either from Stephen Batchelor's Buddhism Without Beliefs or Andrew Olenski's book. I can't remember the name of that one, but there is this image of holding onto a snake that wants to be let go. And that is the cognitive effort. The invitation is just to allow, just to let go, to recognize that and just settle into the body in the meditation. And the more we do that, there's a training element. The more we do that, the more we develop that capacity and that skill to let go. And that will be very, very helpful in our day-to-day life, especially if we're struggling with old, familiar, difficult patterns of mind. Okay, see you on the meditation cushion. Thank you.